Hello, this is Paul Malone, and I'm here to do a video about how to set up the add forms in Ideal Forms for Jira. I'm going to use an existing use case that I have. This particular use case is for Performance Measure Manager that we have, and it essentially uses a Jira project to define what is a performance measure, and then it uses sub-issues of that project to capture the measure reports. In other words, the metrics over time are captured with a sub-issue. I use the add in two places in this particular use case. One is to add a measure itself, and then the other is to add a measure report. I'm going to show you how both of those work. So looking at the forms that I have here, the list will give me the list of measures in my system. The main and the detail show me kind of the detail about my measures. And then my measure reports are those things that I'm adding inside of the measure. So let me just open up the list and I'll show you the first place that I add. The first place I add is up here where I have add new measure. When I click that, it opens up a whole new form where I need to select a piece of metadata that I want. And then I enter a name for the measure that has some regular expressions on it. To limit me to a certain number of values, in other words, schedule, budget, or performance. I'm going to hit cancel, and I'll go into a given measure. And what we'll see is information about that measure. And down here, we have the measure reports. So, and I've got a button on the screen for adding a new measure report. So if I click that, I'll get a pop-up dialog that lets me add a particular new measure report. And if I put in test, and then I put in a target period, a target of say 5 and a period actual of 9, and then I'll set it for Q2 April, save done. And what that will do is add the measure and put it into my list down here. So now let me go back and show you how both of these are set up. Okay, so from the form administration screen, you can see that I have several add forms here. In reality, I've only got two. This particular add form is just a wrapper for the styling of this one. And if I double click on this one, you'll see it's the familiar, let's go ahead and add the fields to add a new measure. So what I want to do is talk about how this one is set up. So the first step is to create a new form, and then in the form settings, make sure you click form type add. That indicates to the Jira system that the metadata we need to be able to add is going to be to use as the add metadata. The second thing you have to do, of course, is pick what kind of issue type you're going to be adding, and that issue type has to come from the form group. So I've bound my project, or my performance measures to this particular form group. And then you do need to give it a test issue, and the reason for that is in the designer needs a test issue from which you can set up your form itself. So even though we're not adding, PMM-2 each time, I put that in here for the purpose of the designer. So once that is set up, and the key field being the add, go ahead and give it a test issue. You can then come to your form itself and you can edit it. So let me come back to my designer and I'll click Form Design. And what we'll have is a standard editor, just like the normal one. So you can add as much as you want to the design as you would like. If you look at the field reference, you can see all the fields that you have access to for the add. So all of these fields I could put into the add. And for those Jira administrators, these are essentially the fields that you associate with the create screen. So anything you put on the create screen, you can access from here. So coming back to the form itself, I want to talk about this button here. I could very easily have done this. I'm going to go ahead and add a field into 6.4. I'm going to come down to my 6.4 field, and I'm going to set it to be a form buttons. Where's my form buttons? They're there. And if I design this now, we're going to see that I've got save, reload, and done. Those three buttons will work just like normal. When you click save, it will actually add the new issue. The reload would just reload the form itself, and done will kick you back to whatever your default form is, or whatever you put into your data reference for done. Now, In this case, for my use case, I needed to do something else. I actually wanted to collect these two fields only. I wanted to hit save, essentially save those two fields, and then open another form. And I want to go ahead and show you how I did that. So using the next button here, that's this field right here, 5.4 next button. If we look down a little bit, we'll see that I've got an event on here, so the on change. So when you click the button next, it's going to fire this particular method, on new measure next. And this is for kind of advanced usage, but basically if you want, you can come in here and add a method for on new measure next. And in there, what I'm doing is I'm getting the value of the field that was clicked, and then I'm saving it. And then what I'm doing is basically going to another form. So instead of going back, I'm specifically going to form PMM main, which is, if I come back to my main form, PMM main, it's this one. So what effectively happens is I capture those first two fields, and then I'll dive in here, and then I'll let them enter their performance reports. So now let me talk about the second use case for adding a form. And that is going to be done from that pop-up I showed you a few minutes ago. And the configuration for it is this form right here. So this one, you'll note, is the add, again, just like the other one. And if I look at its form settings, it looks the same. So I'm adding a measure report, which is just an issue type. And I'm naming it add measure report, and it's of type add. And I'm using that for my test issue. If I design it from here, it's going to look like a form on a page. In other words, this is the form that it's going to look like. Now, the reason it looks like this is because I'm opening it with a pop-up button, which indicates to the system to open the form inside of a pop-up dialog. And for that reason, my entire, like the styling, the outer styling, is not here because I don't want it. I want it to be done inside the form. But other than that, it works normally. So I can come in here and I can set my layout. I can set my background colors, whatever I want them to be. And then the form is going to work inside of a pop-up. So you can see that the only difference between this form and a normal form are these three buttons: save, save done, and done. And if we go look at them, we will see that the form buttons are a special type called form buttons for pop-up. They have to be different because the system needs to know that the destroy method is being done inside of a dialog that is part of an underlying form. And for that reason, the default values are save, save done, and done. So that's how you set up a basic form for a pop-up. Now let me show you how you reference it from the underlying form. I'm going to come back here, and I happen to know that the add is going to be in PMM detail. So if I design this guy, what we have is the form, and on the form we have a button called Add Measure Report, and I want to go look at the configuration of that button. So to get there quickly, I'm going to click Edit Layout, and then I'm going to click on Open Pop Form, and that will bring me to this Open Pop Form configuration. And as you can see here, all it is the control type is Open Pop Form, the data source is Add Measure Report, and the data reference is New Subtask. Now there are several options for adding via a pop-up. The new subtask is obviously a subtask, but if we click this little question mark, it should open up what kinds of options we have. So new subtask is a new subtask. New related is for a new related task. In other words, it'll create the new kind of task and set up a relationship between the two. And the last one is blank for just a new issue of this type. So based on how you set that, it'll add that kind of measure, and that's it. So you click those three things, and then I'm going to go ahead and click Preview. In the form itself, when you click it, it's going to fire up the pop-up and bring up the option to add a new measure. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.